Have you ever thrown a blanket or a towel over something to quickly conceal it? Have you ever thrown everything in sight into your closet to hide it away? Today's question: is it ever right to cover up sin? We read a beautiful verse about love in the little book of 1 Peter. Above all things, have fervent love for one another, for love will cover a multitude of sins. What does this mean? Let's first be clear on what it does not mean. Sin is a reality in this world, in our own lives, and in the lives of those we love. That's obvious enough. And we need to recognize sin and call it what it is so we can avoid its lures and its traps. So covering sin does not mean pretending that it doesn't exist. But our thoughts should not always be focused on sin either. Paul tells us that we're to think on things true, noble, just, pure, lovely, of good report, virtuous, and praiseworthy. These things are the very opposite of sin. No, we don't ignore sin, pretending that it doesn't exist, but neither are we to advertise it. And that's what Peter's talking about here. Love will cover a multitude of sins. In the book of Proverbs, we actually read this: hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sins. This word cover means exactly what we think it means, to cover up. It means to hide something, or even to steal it away so that it can no longer be seen. So when someone says the wrong thing or does the wrong thing, whether it's intentional or not, love, we read here, will not broadcast it. It will not gossip about it, but instead it will minimize it. It will make it seem as small as it possibly can make it. In fact, if possible, love will try to hide it away completely so that no one ever knows that it even happened. Why? The bottom line, it's not our job to deal with the sins of others. We have our own sin to deal with. We can be sure that God is at work in other people's lives and hearts to show them their own sin. There's enough sin in the world, and there is more than enough heartache. We certainly don't need to make sin any bigger than it already is by spreading it around. Especially today, think about it. It has never been easier for one little sin to travel around the world in such a short time than it is today with social media. One little comment like, "Did you hear what happened today?" can start a wildfire of trouble from one little spark of gossip. Later on in Proverbs, we read that repeating a matter, aka gossiping, separates friends. We know this is true. How many broken friendships have you seen because someone felt the need to tell someone else about another someone's sins? No, we're not to cover up our own sins. We need to confess those and turn our back on them. But our goal should be to do all that we can to cover up the sins of others. In fact, in Corinthians, Paul takes things one step further. There he says that love bears all things. This word bears also speaks of covering, like building a roof over top of something. But it means even more. It implies that we will patiently endure whatever it costs for us to cover the sins of others. We will carry the load of their sin for them, keeping our mouths shut even when it costs us, in order to keep them from shame. Now that's a very high calling. But this shouldn't surprise us, because a second reason that we're to cover up the sins of others is because Jesus has covered our sin, all of it. The Lord Jesus carried the full load of my sin for me. Then he paid its debt in full. He covered the cost to keep me from shame and condemnation. Now, as his followers and as children of God, he invites us to share in his work of covering sin. No, we can't take sin away. That's God's business. We know that. But we can cover sins, all sorts of sins. Now, with that being said, there is a time when it's right to confront people about sin. Sometimes the best way to cover sins is by helping others to avoid them in the first place. Between friends, we might sometimes need to go to someone privately and quietly say to them, "Hey, I see you've been struggling with such and such. Is there anything I can do to help you? May I pray with you? Maybe we can help stop them from traveling down a dangerous path. And James tells us that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way will save a soul from death and cover a multitude of sins. So the next time you're tempted to spread the word about someone else's failures, remember, it's hatred that stirs up strife, but love covers all sins. Have a wonderful day.